What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody's having a wonderful, beautiful day. Welcome to Jazz Talk with alternative venues for jazz. My name is Mike Monford. It's my pleasure to be here. Pleasure to share with you. Talking about jazz. How did I get into jazz? I got into jazz because it's a part of my culture, African American culture. So it was in my family. You talk about culture and family. So in Detroit is where I grew up, my home city. We had a really good radio station here, several radio stations, public radio stations. So I got to hear jazz on public radio, but also just my grandfather and my father were jazz heads. My father's from Philadelphia originally, and he played trumpet in high school, and then when he got drafted into the Vietnam War, he quit playing trumpet, but he had a really extensive album collection, and that's how I really got into the music, just being exposed through it from listening and from it being a part of my culture, African American culture. I grew up between Detroit and Philadelphia. Philadelphia is where both of my parents are from. So two African American cities with a big African American influence and lots of music. So that's how I got into jazz music. Um, One of the first jazz musicians that I ever remember hearing were some of the local musicians right here in Detroit, some of the local masters. My father frequented a lot of jazz clubs, so he would take me along with him, and I got to hear Marcus Belgrave, Harold McKinney, Donald Walden. These are some Detroit area musicians. I got to see Jerry Allen. Jaribu Shaheed. And I got to hear a wide range of jazz growing up in Detroit because we had a place called the Greystone Ballroom, and there was a group, an old fashioned group called the McKinney Cotton Pickers. So I heard ragtime, bebop, and then like avant garde or creative spiritual music as well. Excuse that bell. On top of being Mike Monford, Professor Monford and Mr. Monford, I'm the one of the band directors here at Chandler Park Academy, and I'm over the jazz band at Chandler Park Academy. So all of this is connected when you're talking about jazz and who was the first musician I heard. Um, that really put me on a mission and everything, and that's why I include the education as well. Another thing, being exposed to jazz like that early on as a kid, there was the vinyl culture when I was coming up. I was born in '73, so the album art was a piece of art and then a liner note. So you would look at the album art and you would read the liner notes either while you were listening to the album or after. You would read them several times actually because it gave you a very good description of the album, and that got me into going through my father's record collection and just anybody's record collection when I would go over their house. Back then, the vinyl culture, people kept their records on the floor and everything, and you would just thumb through them. So my father had all of his jazz albums on the floor in front of our stereo, and the album that sat in the front was by Lee Morgan, and the album was The Gigolo. When I asked my father about it, he was able to tell me a ton about Lee Morgan because he had been a trumpeter and that Lee Morgan was from Philadelphia. I just really zeroed in on the music once I heard that album. Had I heard other jazz albums, of course, but that particular one grabbed me. The album cover also grabbed me. Lee looked very intense playing his trumpet, and he looked very powerful playing his trumpet. So that's what really got me into the music. Part of my culture, some exposure from my parents, and then being able to go see live music growing up as a kid between Detroit and Philadelphia and everything. So when I started going to the record store to purchase albums, one of the first, I purchased about five albums. I'm trying to remember those five, but I know one was Blues and Abstract Truth by Oliver Nelson, A Love Supreme. I got like a Charlie Parker album. It was live and they had like a few different performances on it. And then Thelonious Monk, Brilliant Corners. I remember purchasing that and everything. And after that, I spent any money I made cutting grass or working at McDonald's or whatever, or DJing parties on purchasing albums, and really got into the culture of jazz. I took it a little bit deeper than everybody else in my family. I got into the avant-garde type of side of the music with Sun Ra. I mean, they call it Afrofuturism now. At one time, they called it the new thing, then free jazz, then avant-garde, and now it's called Afrofuturism. But when I got into the vinyl culture and was really able to go to the record store and purchase my own vinyl, I was able to explore then because a vinyl store is like a library. It's a library of sound and all kind of awesome stuff just to explore and everything. And that continued really throughout my childhood. I got into the vinyl culture in the '70s, and then I started DJing house parties, and I started DJing my father's cabarets as well. Growing up in the '70s in Detroit and several places, it was a van culture. The conversion vans, the adults would take them and get them customized with carpet, beds, and everything. And they had van clubs where we would travel, go to campsites, and have rallies and everything. So I grew up traveling in a car with my parents, going from state to state in a van club, or just us as a family. So tons of listening to music. Back then, there was no internet. So once we reached the mountains, it was bluegrass music. My mother was a big country and western music fan, so I grew up hearing Conway Twitty, Loretta Lynn, Patsy Cline, Johnny Cash, Charlie Pride, just to name a few. And then my dad was the one that was into the jazz and the soul and everything. So their influence, me being exposed, that made me go into the music but I started DJing because by me being born in 1973, I'm directly born into hip hop. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary and continue to. But I was, the music of my generation was hip hop, but by me being a DJ, I listened to everything. So started DJing cabarets. The first cabaret I ever DJ, believe it or not, I was 5. I actually helped the DJ, but I was digging through the crates and picking the albums and seeing the how the audience reacted and everything. And that went on into junior high school. I started DJing house parties and everything under the name DJ Eminem. I also did school dances, and that continued DJing, heavy listening, heavy exploring through the record store, through people's vinyl collection. And what happened when I got to the ninth grade in high school, I had been trying to get a hold of a saxophone, but my parents were concentrating on my education more, and at the time, just keeping me safe. I have to mention this. You have to always mention the background and what was going on in the 80s and the 70s in Detroit and several cities. We were going through the crack era. So it was a lot of economic and social turmoil. So parents trying to keep me safe, definitely trying to keep me out of trouble and get from getting around the wrong crowd. So music was like a safe haven for me and everything. So back to ninth grade. I get to ninth grade and I started at a high school named St. Martin de Porres, where I was an athlete as well. And when I got there, we had a choir, no band. School focused more on athletics and academics. Choir teacher named Dr. Jackson had moved from Louisiana, had taught at Xavier University. He put together this dynamic choir that I was a part of. That was the first time I really got to experiment with tone, with singing in unison. First time I got to sing in harmony and keep my part. And that continued through ninth grade. We performed at several churches, several festivals, and he left in 10th grade. So no choir, no music program. I finished my 10th grade year at St. Martin de Porres, and that's when I decided I was gonna go into music all the way, with no instrument, by the way, but just a ton of inspiration. So 10th grade, I transferred after 10th grade, and I went to my neighborhood high school, which was John Persian High School in Detroit. And when I got to Persian, I did not join the marching band or whatever. By then, I was starting to hang out in the jazz clubs in the city. I was sneaking in, I was getting kicked out, I was getting a fake ID to go in, and I switched from going to like hip hop clubs to jazz clubs. And I got really close with all of the masters and the elders in the community. And they took me under their wing, and that's when I started studying the saxophone. It was like 11th grade. There was a master here in Detroit. He's an ancestor now. His name was Dr. Teddy Harris Jr., and he was a saxophonist and composer, and he was one of the principal arrangers at Motown, and he was the main arranger for the group Supremes, and he worked with Marvin Gaye, worked with a little bit of everybody at Motown, but great arranger, great saxophonist. So by me being around him, I was around all of the jazz musicians, but I was also around all of the Motown musicians who were still alive then. And that's how Barry Gordy put Motown together. He went to the jazz community because they had the chops and also the skill and the theory to put the music together. So studying with Dr. Harris, hanging in the jazz clubs, jumping around, and I started studying with all of those old heads in their living room. I called that period of my life the University of the Streets because I put together my own conservatory right in people's living room. This is when the music was still in the community, and not just totally academia. I'll get into that in a second. But I studied $20 lessons in their living room, University of the Streets, my own conservatory. And this continued all the way through my senior year and everything. Um, Fast forward to my senior year, everything spiritual and your life has a lot to do with your musical journey. My senior year, my oldest daughter was on the way. So, teenager, 17, about to be 18, baby on the way, about to graduate, and I had some decisions to make. So, what I did after high school, I continued my University of the Streets in their living room, but I went to community college to take some courses because my grade point had dropped a little at the end of high school with everything I had going on. Continued University of the Streets, went to the junior college, took classes, and during that time, I was not only around those masters, but I was around my childhood peers such as Kareem Riggins, James Carter, Rodney Whitaker, J.D. Allen, just to name a few. And everybody helped get me ready for the conservatory. I told them that I wanted to go and study with Jackie McLean at the University of Hartford's Hart Conservatory. So for like 2 years, that's what I was getting drilled and getting prepped for. Um, I finally went and auditioned with Jackie McLean. Long audition process, but I got in, and Jackie McLean was one of my main heroes on saxophone, alto saxophone. I was trying to get close to him as well because he was a direct connection with Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker was like his mentor and teacher, so I looked at it like I was just a few steps away from getting that fresh knowledge from Bird and everything. So when I got up there to the East Coast in Hartford, I'm studying with Jackie, but being so close to New York City, I started hanging out in New York City. We would jump in my little red Aspire, the Ford Aspire, and pile up in there with our instruments, and we would hang out in New York all night, then rush back to class. When I was in New York at that time, I studied with anybody that I could study with and just soak up their knowledge. That's how I got into Bill Lee's band. I did that for a while and soaked up some knowledge from him. And about a year and a half later, I ran out of money for college, like a lot of us do. And at that point, I turned pro. I was still developing, still learning, but I just continued my studies outside of the university with Jackie McLean, and I also would drive up to Amherst, Massachusetts, and study with Yusuf Lateef. That's how I started out playing professionally, and it kind of went from there. I'm going to talk about current projects. If you look me up, of course, I'm a saxophonist, composer, and historian and educator. So some of the story I just shared with you, me being a teenage dad, me coming up in Detroit and Philly during that heavy struggle, I found my passion and my mission in like middle school, and I said I wanted to teach music, specifically jazz and everything, because I slowly saw that it was leaving the community where you didn't necessarily study at People House and really bring that part of the music where jazz has the music part, but it's community. So it went super academia and it's really academia now. So I always said I would go into the neighborhood where it was the children were challenged financially, socially, maybe it's not as many financial resources, and bring my program to those schools. So one project that's ongoing, this is year 8. There's a free music camp that I give every year called Some Boy Music Camp. It runs for 4 weeks. It's totally free. I give the camp regardless of how crazy my tour schedule is. Outside of that, band director over jazz band at Chandler Park Academy District through the elementary through to high school. So super passionate about teaching and giving back. The other big project that I have out now, I have a new album dropping May 17th. The album is entitled The Cloth I'm Cut From. A new single, a drop tomorrow morning. It's an Abby Lincoln composition called Throw It Away. 2 weeks prior to that, a single drop named Jaja. 2 weeks prior to that, a single entitled Exotic, which was composed by Lee Morgan. So it's two singles out now, one to drop tomorrow morning. Entire project will come out May 17th. That album was recorded live in Detroit during the pandemic. When they let us come out, when they lifted the restrictions in like May of the pandemic, I got a call and we went into the club for 3 nights in July and recorded that album. Some of the people on the album, the great percussionist Kevin Jones, pianist Pam Wise, drummer Tariq Gardner, trumpeter Alan Denard, a tenor saxophonist, and one of my mentors, Calvin Taylor. You got William Hill the third on piano, and I got a string section: BB Sewell on violin, Xavier Gilliam on violin, and then a MC is on there, MC Nappy Debbie. So the album, The Cloth I've Cut From, that's what it's talking about, the various layers of cloth in me. So musically, you hear all of the different styles of music that I've soaked up over the years: jazz, hip hop, R&B, you name it. I hate using genre words. I really like to say the diaspora. So I went into the African American diaspora. So it's heavy on rhythm. You can hear the different traditions out of African American community, and just the African experience. Period. From the Middle Passage and the slave trade, all of the different stops where Africans were sold. You'll hear Brazilian rhythms on the album, Afro Cuban, Latin. You hear Yoruba in the music, and then you hear Detroit and Philly in there. So musically, the cloth, and then it's an MC on the album. I definitely had to include the layer of hip hop, and I have a tribute song on there to my mother and other African American women called Pearson Eyes. So super excited about the new album. This is my second recording as a leader. The first one came out in 2012. That album was entitled Perseverance. Another project that I have coming up, the album's dropping. I am working on the album showcase. The first album showcase will be at the Jazz Museum in Harlem on Saturday, June 8th, and it'll be from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. It is entitled Mike Monford and the Jazz Museum in Harlem present an evening of Afrofuturism. What'll happen, doors are open at 4. From 4:30 to about 6 p.m., there will be a panel discussion on Afrofuturism. We got the author and historian Herb Boyd moderating it. Also joining us on the panel, the trumpeter and composer Ahmed Abdullah, a guitarist composer Lou Fuki, and an elder and griot from Detroit named Baba Mosi Humphrey. They'll be doing a panel immediately after the panel. From 6 to about 7:30 will be a live concert where we'll perform the material from my new album, The Cloth I'm Cut From. Super excited about that. The band I have with me that night, Mike Monford, me on alto sax, Josh Evans on trumpet, Sharp Radway will be on the piano, Curtis Lundy will be on the bass, um, Jerome Gillespie will be on the drums, and then I'm bringing in the innovative string section I put together from Detroit. Lena Martin on violin, and Daria Edwards on viola, and Brendan Cowles on the cello. So I'm super excited about that. Definitely spread the word. That flyer and the tickets will go on sale tomorrow, and spread the word. So that's like the main new projects I have. The music camps, of course, which are annual, and then this new album coming out and everything. Some awards that I've received, not any awards particularly, but I would say accomplishments, which I think are the same thing. In the last 2 years, I'm a part of a thing called Auto Physio Psychic Music (APP), and we performed at Carnegie Hall. That group is led by Angel Batdawi, Lou Fuki, Adam Zanolini. Also, I did a residence and master class for a week at the University of Michigan, Wilkes-Barre University. Did a summer residency at Cranbrook Art Institute, and another thing, working with Herb Boyd, he wrote the liner notes for my first album, and he wrote the liner notes for the new album. So I don't really have any awards, but a lot of accomplishments over the year and everything, and have been able to give back a lot. Um, some good advice that I received from elder musicians growing up. A lot of them had been a part of the heroin epidemic or drugs. They definitely told me to keep clean. They encouraged me to exercise, to eat healthy. A lot of my teachers I did raw juicing with. We would do yoga or meditate before the lessons, and they taught me to get really good training at whatever I was going to do, music or whatever, because you want to be one of the best. There is no one, you just want to be one of the best. So good training so I could have a good career in music, and taking care of myself healthy. They also told me I was given an assignment by all of them. I call them griots or elders to give back, to share. They reminded me that they were sitting there and spending time with me and sharing, and so they expected me to do that because that is how the tradition stays alive. So I'm from the tribal approach. In Africa, there's a griot, the old head, that is the one that teaches the traditions and culture, and then people go out and spread that. If the grill doesn't do that, the culture dies. Just like if you burn down a library, you can erase a lot of history and information about a culture. So a lot of giving back and just keep a responsibility of keeping the culture going. Some advice for young musicians: get good training. Um, be patient, take your time, and don't get distracted, especially nowadays by the internet and by social media. Get quiet, find a practice room, get you good instructors, and practice everything slow at first so you can really get it under your hands and then speed it up. If it's jazz, you want to study the master, so you do want to do some transcribing, because when you transcribe a solo, that master takes over your fingers and you get a master class for free. um, Something else, young musicians, learn the business part. When I got into it, the business was different. Everything wasn't independent yet. You had people that were just booking agents, people that were managers, people that were record companies. Now, as an artist, you have to usually put out your own material, which means you have to have the business side. So, on top of studying music, young musicians, take a business course, even a small business course online or a 6 week business course, just so you have some knowledge of business. And exercise. You need to be healthy. You need to have your cardiovascular together so you have energy. Think about the long haul, and take care of yourself. Do raw juicing, make smoothies, work on your cardio, and make sure you take care of your mental health. And hang around musicians that are doing big things, because you want to associate yourself with people that are going places. All right, I'm gonna play a little bit, and then I think we getting out of here. Little horn for y'all. Remember, look out for that new album, The Cloth I'm Cut From, May 17th. Look for that single that'll drop tomorrow morning. May 3rd, Abby Lincoln tune, Throw It Away. This has been great. I look forward to coming back in the near future, talk a little bit more about the album. And thank you. Take care, everybody. Peace.